Today, we're diving into one of the most strategically complex places on the entire planet, the South China Sea. Now, this isn't just some big body of water. You have to think of it more like a geopolitical chessboard. And the moves being made there by global powers, well, they could have consequences for every single one of us. So you might be sitting in London or Sao Paulo or Chicago and thinking, okay, but why should I care? Because what happens in these waters is absolutely fundamental to the global economy and to international security. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Here's why. A staggering 40% of all global maritime trade passes right through this sea. That's nearly half of everything shipped by sea on Earth. The source material calls it the jugular of global trade. And honestly, that's no exaggeration. Any disruption here could send massive shockwaves through the entire world economy. To really get our heads around this, we're going to break it down just like a strategy game. First, we'll look at the chessboard itself. Then, China's aggressive opening moves, the counterplay from the alliances, a whole new economic game that's unfolding, and finally, where we are now, in a very risky endgame stalemate. All right, first up, the maritime chessboard. This is the high-stakes arena we've been talking about, where the US and China are really vying for influence, testing the limits of international law, and basically shaping the future of our global supply chains. So let's talk about China's opening moves. You see, Beijing isn't just playing the game as it is. It's using a whole series of bold strategies to try and change the rules of the board itself. And believe me, they have the pieces to do it. China now has the world's largest naval force if you're just counting ships, and it's a real triple threat. You've got the official navy, the Plan, with its advanced aircraft carriers. Then there's the absolutely massive China Coast Guard. And finally, this kind of shadowy but incredibly powerful maritime militia. Altogether, they create this constant, overwhelming presence that's really, really hard to counter. So, how do they use all this force? This is where we need to understand a really crucial concept: gray zone tactics. Basically, these are aggressive actions, pushing, shoving, intimidating, that are deliberately designed to be just below the level of an act of war. The whole point is to achieve strategic goals without ever firing a shot that could lead to a full-blown conflict. A perfect example of this is a tactic known as salami slicing, making small, aggressive moves one little slice at a time. For instance, 2025 saw a huge spike in things like ramming incidents and the use of high-pressure water cannons, especially against ships from the Philippines. It's really a strategy of exhaustion designed to just wear down your rivals until they give up. Okay, so how is the rest of the world responding to all this? Well, that brings us to the alliance counterplay, as the US and its partners start building up their defense. A big part of the response is forming what are called mini-lateral alliances. These are small, flexible, but very strategic groups. And the most important one right now is the Squad, which brings together the United States, the Philippines, Japan, and Australia to coordinate and push back against all this regional pressure. And get this is no longer just a Pacific issue. In late 2025, joint naval patrols actually included warships from countries as far away as France and Canada. That's a huge signal that freedom of navigation in these waters has become a top-tier global security priority. But the competition here isn't just military. Nope. There is a whole new economic game being played, and the goal here is to control the flow of trade and resources. A key piece in this economic game is China's Hainan Free Trade Port. Beijing is basically turning this entire island into a massive economic hub, a kind of fortress designed to rival giants like Singapore and Dubai. It's a strategic tool, plain and simple, meant to pull Southeast Asian nations deeper and deeper into China's economic orbit. And at the very heart of all these disputes, both the military ones and the economic ones, are two fundamentally different ways of looking at the law. On one side, you have the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, which is pretty much the global standard. And on the other, you have China's claim, which is based on so-called historical rights. That claim was rejected by an international tribunal back in 2016, but it is still absolutely central to Beijing's position. So let's just quickly recap the key strategic pieces on the board. China's artificial islands are now fully militarized. They're essentially unsinkable aircraft carriers. Legally, Beijing continues to ignore international rulings and stick to its historical rights claim. And beneath the waves, a new silent front has opened up, with autonomous drones completely changing the game of naval intelligence. And other nations are definitely pushing back economically. Indonesia is partnering up with Vietnam to develop a big gas field, while India is extending its energy exploration rights in disputed waters. These aren't just business deals. These are direct assertions of their own sovereign rights, challenging China's claims head-on. So, after all these moves and countermoves, where does it all leave us? Well, we're in the endgame, a very tense and incredibly risky stalemate. The situation right now is best described as competitive coexistence. What that means is a state of constant, low-level friction. It's a perpetual standoff where both sides are competing like crazy, but they're also trying very, very hard to avoid a direct, full-scale military conflict. And this brings us to the most critical takeaway from all this. The main danger moving forward isn't some pre-planned war. The source material warns that the real risk, the thing to watch for, is a miscalculation. A moment during one of these tense gray zone encounters where a ship captain just makes the wrong split-second decision, forcing a kinetic response. In other words, forcing someone to open fire. Which leaves all of us with a final and pretty sobering question. On this crowded, complex, high-stakes chessboard, how close are we to a single wrong move that could lead to disaster? The entire world is watching to find out.